Hey, and welcome everyone to our next session here at Eurppean Payments Conference on cloud banking and AI and payment. Our moderator, Christian, at the moment has some technical difficulties, so I have the pleasure of introducing our today's panel. First, we have and will have again in a few minutes Christian, who's the CEO of Vandenberg AG, main service provider in transaction processing for large banks. Then we have Martin here from Fidor Bank, where he's not only a leader in the management, but also the main expert on all topics cloud and AI. And we have Andreas from UBS, the COO and main responsible partner for the European markets here. We today want to discuss sort of two major topics that I think are driving and interesting for all of us. So on the one hand, cloud banking, cloud solutions for all payments and banking use cases. And the second topic would be AI and the many implications and use cases AI can have in the payment landscape in Europe. I would like to start with maybe very first.
Sorry, I'm back again. Are you able to hear me or?
Perfect. Christian, just in time. So just introduced everyone, and you can directly start with your first question.
Thank you very much, Nicolas. I'm very sorry because of some technical issues. I lost the connectivity to the connection to the conference. Just to introduce
in the
myself.
Cloud.
Yeah, I was not in the cloud, but I was in the lack of artificial intelligence, maybe. Yeah, but so I'm the last one that is not introduced. I understood. So my name is Christian Fink. I'm a board member of the Frankfurt Payment Network, and the Frankfurt Payment Network, as the name says, is a network of payment experts. And since I'm in the payment business since 25 years, I'm very happy to meet a lot of friends there that are in the same opinion that payment is not a boring business, but that really are interested in this. Yeah, and since I don't earn money in this payment network, besides that, I'm a board member of Vandenberg AG. So, and of course, we are doing payments as well. Just from my side, I'm very pleased to have the opportunity here to moderate the second half of this panel, since Nicolas started with the first. And
you're breaking up, Christian. Sorry.
I'm very thankful for the invitation.
We cannot hear you, so let's if it's okay for you, Nicolas, Andreas, let's start with the first topic we wanted to discuss and wait for Christian to come back.
Exactly. So the first question we wanted to
discuss.
Yeah, I think I can start, but the studio, can you please mute Christian? I think that would be very helpful, because I think he still tries to speak. Okay, that is good. So I will start quickly, anticipating the question that first of all, introducing myself in a second, and then maybe my first thoughts on payments, artificial intelligence, but also cloud and what it does to us in now and in the future. My name is Andreas Przewloka. Thanks again already for the first introduction. As you heard, I work for UBS. I'm the COO for UBS. We created here in Europe a European bank a while ago, which we run out of Frankfurt, became quite significant after Brexit. And UBS in general on a global scale is obviously also very much exposed to payments. We have, in particular in our Asian, but also Switzerland in the market, huge amounts. We are processing 380 million roughly of payments every year, roughly 380 billion of value every day. So quite a significant size for us. But still, it's only 1% of the overall market. So I don't want to make it bigger than it is, but it is really substantial. Therefore, we are quite interested also. I used to work in many areas front to back, leading sales forces and wealth management units, but also actually running operations IT. And now at the moment also as COO, I overlook also the operations departments. And when we look into payments and the future, first of all, I have to say, looking out 5 years is very difficult. It's artificial intelligence and cloud as a technology are technologies that develop exponentially. And therefore, I would say any sort of prediction over 5 years is not so easy. Clearly, we can say that these technologies will influence the payments and the payment value chain significantly. I start with artificial intelligence. That's not so new. I mean, this is the technology or the ideas we have for many, many decades, but only in the, I would say, in the last 10 years, due to the developments of computer power, connectivity, networks, and so on, artificial intelligence became really impactful. And when it comes to payments, the core of payments is volumes, profitability and convenience, and on the other hand, obviously, as always, risk management and regulatory compliance. So therefore, artificial intelligence will be a key driver to achieve that. Profitability is driven by volume. So only if you have high volumes, you can have, you know, the efficiency, the economies of scale that drives at the end whether you are able to invest, because only then, when you generate profit, you can further invest. So it's all about volumes in this place, and artificial intelligence will allow to scale because it will enable us to automate further. Client convenience is another key point here. The situation is that we obviously have to help the clients to anticipate what they want to do and use intelligence to make the process more convenient and leaner. So here it is about intelligence. And when it comes to risk and risk management, it's a combination of intelligence, but also automation. The less human interaction, the less error-prone the environments will be, and the more you can use artificial intelligence to also, for example, in the area of fraud prevention or anti-money laundering, you can use intelligence to better control and risk manage. Obviously, the better and more solid the environments and the systems are. So I would say, as a first statement, that is what I see around artificial intelligence and how it changes the payments industry. Quickly on cloud, I think here it's obvious. It is a service that you can receive from a service provider. So payments as a service is probably here the key word. That will drive also the focus on what you are good at in the value chain. You can rely on services and interfaces, and that drives scalability, and that goes back to the volume question before. So we will probably come back to some of these points, but those are my initial thoughts on what artificial intelligence and cloud is really doing to the payments situation and business. I give back to, I think, probably Martin.
Should I add my banking view, and then you can complete the wrap up, Nicolas, from your point of view. So there's not much to add from what Andreas mentioned. Just a little intro from myself, Martin Postweiler. I learned the payment trade back in the early hundreds, no, how you say that, like 15 years ago at Deutsche Lufthansa in cash management and treasury. So back then there were totally different aspects about payment than we see today. Now I'm working for Fidor Bank in heading the operations department. And here, as Fidor is a totally different use case than UBS. We are rather small, but we are specialized mainly in connecting crypto entities, PSP, to the fiat money world. And here, both artificial intelligence and the cloud aspect are becoming more and more visible and also more and more important. In addition to what Andreas mentioned, for us, it's mainly about stability, also about speed, especially in the crypto world. You have to be, the delays are not seen very pleasure, or that's not seen as something nice. So speed is an important topic. Flexibility, because if you see the just let alone the Bitcoin movements in the past 12 to 24 months, was quite some volatility. And of course, this is a big challenge for infrastructure. If the volumes go up and down by 100 times or 1,000 times the day before. So this is also something that cloud can be an interesting aspect. And then, of course, if you talk about crypto, you have to talk about, like with cash, about fraud. And artificial intelligence is one way of tackling that, even though and I think we will come to that later. I'm always a bit hesitant in using the term artificial intelligence, because, I mean, there's a wide range of things that can be seen as that. But let's wait for that for later and leave it at that for the intro. And yeah, I see that Tristan is back. Let's hope he has a good connection now, or we can move to Nicolas.
Yeah, I can add my 2 cents. So I think, I mean, we covered all aspects really. Quickly introduce myself. So my name is Nicolas. Right now I am running a fintech startup called Bansware, where we launched a lending as a service solution. Pretty young company, only started last year. Before that, I was building the AI and payments fraud solution for RatePay, a company that was merged with the Nexi Group, and such was one of the biggest European payment companies now. And I can only agree with what Martin and Andreas said, but I would even say it's not so much AI and cloud changing what we are doing in payments. It's much more that payment has evolved and has become faster, has become more global, and friction is going down day by day, really. Customers expect just payments to be as easy as never before. And that just leads us naturally to utilizing technology that is now available. And Andreas put it really well. I mean, AI is nothing new if you look at statistics, but just the computational power is now available. So this is just a natural driver for technology adoption. And also, I think we've gotten to a point where we're just forced to do that. Like, you cannot cope with the current fraud level without employing AI, whatever AI means, and we will get to that in a minute. Christian, are you technically able to take over again, or should we jump to the next question? So for me, it's still frozen. Christian, just jump in whenever you can. And I would just, I mean, we had a quick sync before we started, and I think one of the topics that we discussed and I thought was quite interesting is how much is all this technology adoption purely driven by business, and how much is also competition? And I remember that you, Andreas, had quite interesting thoughts on that. I mean, your market is probably the most competitive one. So what are your 2 cents on that?
Yeah, it's a big topic. And I mean, first of all, what is the competition? Right? The competition is also outside the banking industry when it comes to payments. The big tech firms are in the game already. I think if my latest figures are correct, but it's roughly 10 to 15% of the revenues of the big tech firms actually are made out of banking sort of business. Payments is an important part of it. So it is not only about what I said before, profitability, but also maintaining the leading position. But both go together. If you cannot run it in a profitable way, others will take over. So what is really the driver at the end of the day? Is it volume, or is it technology, or is it anything else? I think it is. Nicolas, you also mentioned a key word. It is client convenience and seamless payment experience. So therefore also the big tech firms are so, I would say, so powerful, because they own the data and the client. So they can, and they actually have learned in a different way than banks what client convenience and seamless integration into client channels, online, mobile, tablets, and so on really means. And let's be fair and honest, in the financial services industry, we come from a different angle. So we have not started with client convenience. We have started with the processing in the center, and now we try to catch up on all these convenience aspects. So therefore, and I come back to a point I made before, it is so important we understand how crucial for us the whole processing, the value chain, and the volume is, because only if we can keep the volume, we can keep the economies of scale. Only when we keep the economies of scale, we can be efficient and effective. Only when we are efficient, we can earn money. And only we can earn money, we can invest, and we can compete, and we can obviously drive innovation. So that all belongs together. And if that cycle is broken somewhere, I think we will be kicked out of the market, so to speak. And I mean, you also mentioned blockchain before. There's also a way of doing actually transactions and interactions peer-to-peer without any intermediary in between anymore. So those are my thoughts. So it's really crucial for us that we keep this inside, that we need to drive volume at the same time that we drive convenience and interaction to the client. That's really key. I pause and let others chip in here on my thoughts.
Yes, I mean, there's not much to add. Other than I would add, from my point of view, the security issue, because the best user experience and the best volumes or the best efficient or most efficient way to handle payments doesn't help if you are if you have security issues and cause risk on the other end. So I would also use the experience that we have seen in the past, that the security issue, especially if it comes to cloud, and you see it every day in the news. It's an existential issue, especially for the banking industry, I would say. And right now, also we see many phishing cases in the market. Mobile devices are being hacked. Even the second factor has been hacked. This is causing a whole new threat and a whole new issue to the entire user experience, which wasn't seen in the past, at least not that visible. So I fully agree with you, Andreas, but security is something, especially if it comes to cloud, that we should really also add, in my opinion.
Definitely, and let's maybe use that and go a bit more into detail and specific use cases. So you mentioned the cloud aspect now. What are some of the applications of cloud technology in payment that you see, Martin, in your company or other banks?
Yeah, first, I mean, also cloud is nothing new. It's also around for quite a while. So I would also recommend, or I always try to differentiate to make sure what kind of cloud we are talking about. So this makes a big difference. And I think we talked about it earlier in preparing this session. It's a big difference if you talk about a private cloud or a public cloud. So a private cloud, this is nothing more than a managed database, more or less, or managed data center. So this is nothing really fancy or really revolutionary. And that's something that we, of course, have been active for quite a while, because it helps us in managing the volumes and the volatility of payments on short notice. If you do it on in your own basement, there's also the security issue from another angle, but that's another topic. But if you have your own infrastructure on your own premises, and if you're a small company, it's going to kill you if you have a large increase of volume. And it happened to us before I started in the first crypto room in 2017. There were thousands of new customers per day when the first increase of Bitcoin price happened, wanting to open an account and doing payments. We just couldn't handle the volume because of the infrastructure. And this is now different because we can just click a switch and add capacity to the infrastructure. This is for me a no-brainer to add capacity from the infrastructure side. This is one use case. For the payments, for the payments engine itself, it becomes more complicated, I would say. After my time in the airline industry, I went to a small cloud payments provider for corporate payments, and they were one of the first offering a public cloud for payments. And there was a huge resistance from especially large corporates to share the same database, even if it's multi-tenant enabled, of course, but physically it's the same database that's shared between two large entities or corporates. And there was quite a lot of reluctance to do that and to convince the own IT guys and security guys to test or to try that. And many large corporations said, no, I want to have my private cloud. I don't want to share anything. And there's always two sides of the coin. There are some advantages for this argument and some other for the other side. But this was a valid discussion. I think it's still valid and should be led to make sure that we have the risks visible for both sides. So either private cloud or public cloud. But cloud in general is something this is now going to be mainstream, more or less, in my opinion.
Fully
How
agree.
Do you see that, Andreas?
No, absolutely agree. Nicolas, I wanted to ask you also, you must have a strong view also on, the big tech firms and the new technology coming from those angles and the impact. What's your view on that?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I think, if we look at cloud computing, then obviously the infrastructure providers are big tech firms. So we are all sourcing from AWS. In my case, I think Microsoft and Google are other strong competitors. And so on that side, they are profiting. But what I find interesting is how far they really move into the customer side of the payments landscape. And on the one hand, obviously we all see them moving there. Google Pay, Apple Pay, and now WhatsApp, and if you look at Tencent and WeChat, it's even more prevalent. But on the other side, I also see a lot of reluctance of those providers to really cover the whole value chain end to end. And if you talk to people at Google or Amazon, they often, or Apple maybe even more, their intent is not to do everything. Their intent is not to operate a bank and run a bank and deal with customer deposits and regulation. They just want to serve the client in the best way possible. And if we find a possibility within our ecosystem to partner with those, and I think Goldman Sachs had a good example where they partnered with Apple in a lot of the products, just because they understood that if you want to be part of the business, you also need to maybe be content to be somewhere in the background if others are just better able to service a client when it comes to the customer interface. And of course, this is something that we might not all like, and it's probably difficult if you run a large retail bank, and I'm looking at you, Andreas, but it's also a big opportunity if you are the first one to adopt this new way of cooperation.
But I actually entirely agree, and I don't want to say I regret that I called the big tech firms competitors, but in the way they are. But I really like that you bring this thought in, and I see it exactly the same way. I think it's also a change of mindset we all have to have in a renewed world, where one firm will never be able to be the best everywhere, right? We need to learn that corporations and collaborations will be the new normal. And sometimes you collaborate with your competitor in another area. So as you say, so we have chosen our cloud providers. They may become competitors in other fields of the business because the big firms actually build ecosystems and are actually, we are all competing at the end of the day to sort of get as close as possible to the client, to own as much as possible of the data. and to make use of it so that we at the end can generate revenue and profit. Revenue and profit is not everything these days. It's also about, I would say, sustainability and, doing the right things in society. We shouldn't forget that. But at the end of the day, it's also, market share and I would say the good old profitability that counts. So therefore, I like Nicolas, your thought that we should open up and collaborate, which means we need to build interfaces. We need to have common APIs that we can use. We need to have services architecture, which everybody can connect to. And we need also regulations in place so that I would say we have a level playing field, that everybody is sort of working in the same environment and not advantaged or disadvantaged by regulations.
Yeah,
and this is, I think, a good point. You go first, Nicolas.
No, you follow up, and I wanted to just open up the AI aspect as well. But maybe
okay, but before before we go to AI, maybe one topic that's really always haunting me. You mentioned earlier, Andreas, about the big tech companies using the data, etc. And this is something that I'm missing most of the discussion, or in most of the discussions, that something has been or that there's a risk evaluation about the potential misuse or damage or manipulation or whatever you could be with regards to data if you use, for example, large cloud providers like Amazon or Google or Microsoft, because if they are competitors in some way, this might be also a threat, at least a theoretical threat. I mean, even though they have data centers somewhere in Switzerland or in Frankfurt, Germany, whatever, they're still the company, and we don't know how much they can really go into the details of such infrastructure. And I'm always wondering, where's the discussion about a European cloud provider? Like, I think the name was Gaia X a few years back. What happened to that? I mean, we are all running to Amazon, Google, and Microsoft. Of course, they offer the best price versus usability of most of the time, but where are the Europeans?
I think, this discussion is still ongoing, and whenever I talk to, I'm sitting here next to the Kanzleramt and the Federal Parliament, a lot of this discussion is still ongoing. But then if you look at the actual offers, T-System also offers these cloud solutions, and we're all not buying from them, right? And at the same time, internally, a lot of the discussion is around how to prevent that from happening. And myself, for example, whenever we put data on a Microsoft storage, we make sure it's end-to-end encrypted because we might not trust it. So I think it's still happening, but at the same time, as Andreas said, we also need to face the fact of the market and the pressure we have on scalability and profitability. And then maybe somewhere there's this trade-off of, European sovereignty and serving our customers in the best way possible.
Yeah, we probably cannot solve that today, but I agree. It's a difficult trade-off. Yeah.
I think at the end of the day, the concentration risk is really what matters. The more you collaborate, and you collaborate with the big partners, and they own significant volume, the concentration risk and then the single point of failures with those providers have to be considered. But I can tell you out of experience, we have, with our own solutions, lots of issues as well, and to protect data, to maintain stability. So it's just, I think the concentration is what concerns me, because if something happens with one of these big providers, then the issue is really, really big. And I think that is something we need to keep in mind. And just think about, I discussed that in another panel a while ago, what happens if we have no network suddenly, right? If we have a wider network outage, such as Christian, who is disconnected today for whatever reason. just imagine you cannot go online anymore. So what is cloud and what is services as payment as a service, or managed services that you receive from someone? How is that all working if there is no network? Network is a commodity for us these days, but you can see in other countries that it is possible actually to switch off the network over seconds, and then you are gone. And what are we doing then? I think that's something that needs to be considered in all.
Yeah, absolutely.
That is a good point. And you just brought up, Andreas, the aspect of security and cloud and maybe potential benefits even from cloud, like availability, for example. I don't know, Martin, you had this problem of scaling up extremely fast, really quick with your company. But those considerations why cloud might be an advantage as well?
Yeah, that was the main aspect, to have the scalability in a short period of time without having to apply own infrastructure, own technicians going to a data center and put some racks somewhere. And this is one of the key issues that made us think about a cloud provisioning, at least to some extent. But this availability is key. And as Andreas said, I mean, we are all doomed if a network is, or even if the power is out, then you're done. But this doesn't affect the decision if it's cloud or not, because if the power is out, you are doomed anyway. And the security also was a big issue when I talked to the corporates a few years back. They were always hesitant of going to the cloud because of security, and they were not aware that their own server in the basement was much more vulnerable than in the cloud, where you have professional protection systems around. So this is also here a two-sided coin, but where you have to look at all the aspects to make sure you have the right basis for your decision. And especially in the banking industry, this is maybe a little different than from other industries, but you have the strong regulation that also has a say in here, and they also have to understand what you're doing. And this is also interestingly changing quite significantly over the last years, how they are seeing the whole cloud issue. So this is also improving, or at least enhancing. Let's not judge that, but it's going forward, and this is also important to have the regulatory side also on board.
Makes sense. Cool. So just looking at the clock, and Christian just messaged me that he's not able to connect again. There really seems to be some router issues. But so we talked a lot about cloud. Let's go a bit into AI. And I don't know, Andreas, how far you can go into details, but maybe you can give us a quick overview of what some interesting applications of AI and payments might be at UBS or elsewhere.
Yeah, it's a snapshot, right? So what I have in mind and what I see, but please add from your side as well. First of all, what we are doing for a while in the area of AI, we have created a center of excellence for UBS. It's not marketing; it's just we figured out this is really a crucial technology for us, where we want to explore things and have some sandbox approaches. And we mainly focus at the moment on, I would say, 2-3 aspects. One is in the area of compliance and financial crime protection. Secondly, how to use artificial intelligence to make the commodity processes less dependent on human intervention and human errors. And third, using artificial intelligence in understanding the needs of the customers, but also their pattern, what they do, down to, I would say, what we all know as robo-advisors. So how can we give advice to our customers when it comes to wealth management, where and how to invest, recognizing their investment pattern, recognizing the investment decisions taken by other big players, and all mapping this into a model that basically automates in an intelligent way how clients should invest. So that's, I would say, the overall framework, what we are looking at, and also do a little bit of research and explore things. When it comes to payments, it's 2 of these aspects. It's mainly in the area of anti-money laundering, financial crime protection. So the elements where you look at pattern, where you build in additional controls to find out suspicious movements and transactions. And secondly, to on the one hand side, to achieve better integration to the customer, so client convenience, but also more automated, more scalability, everything that helps us to automate and to basically take the people out of the process and let it run by machine. Sounds horrible because it sounds like we will drive the unemployment rate up here, but I think at the end of the day we will not, because the volumes go up at the same time, and the people will work in other areas. So that's basically my starting point. Please, Martin and Nicolas, chip in with your thoughts.
Yeah, as I mentioned in the beginning, artificial intelligence as cloud is a wide range of things that are seen under that buzzword. To me, it's also something that we should, or I would look at it from a small scale perspective. So machine learning is one aspect that we are trying to implement services or implement processes that react on certain rules, because I'm a little bit hesitant, especially in the financial industry, with using artificial intelligence, if you're not able to understand how it's been coded or programmed. If you're not able to understand the algorithm, it's to me, a real danger that also something that the regulator is not really happy about, I would say, or I would guess, to use something where I'm not sure that you fully understand from end to end what it does and how it does it, because there are many things that have to be considered in setting up such a process or such a tool. Of course, there are many ways, as you also mentioned, Andreas, especially in fraud, many topics where you can combine learning algorithms or algorithms combined. Depending on certain parameters. For example, some banks are now starting to use the location of your device and the location of the POS if you pay with your mobile card to match if it's the same thing, because that's also a typical classical fraud pattern that you hijack a card and use it somewhere else with the point of sale. So there's many. To sum it up, for now, there's a lot of potential, but also a lot of risk that you're not aware of what exactly this solution is doing.
Yeah, I can just mirror on that, and I think your list of applications was quite exhaustive, Andreas, and fraud in AML was also the one that in my previous company we started with first, because it's just so relatively simple to apply machine learning there. And I would agree with you, Martin. Let's call it machine learning and not AI, as long as we are not in sales mode. But just because you have so many cases, it's just so much simpler. And this also shows the limitation of machine learning. When it's just down to, I don't know, large key account sales, then it's super difficult to employ machine learning to predict their, I don't know, purchase behavior, for example. But for fraud and AML, you have a lot of cases, you have a lot of labels, so you know your fraud cases, you know your money laundering cases, and then using these algorithms for us was relatively simple, and a lot of the worries and fears I had before, and you listed some of them, Martin, and I heard the same ones from BaFin, for example. They evaporated once we looked at the data and stuff like data protection, for example, right? So I had a lot of fears, like, will we violate data protection? And then I talked to my data scientists and asked them, like, okay, so you will need to delete the data after, I don't know, X days. And then they said, yeah, sure, of course we will delete it because we don't need it anymore. It's not fresh enough. And our server is not big enough, even though it was already huge. Or then I told them, okay, guys, you now need to delete the gender field because it's just not ethical to use gender in your predictive model. And then they looked at the model and told me, yeah, it doesn't have any value anyways. So a lot of these discussions then disappear if you really follow the data, and I found that interesting, and I still see a huge gap between the public perception of I don't know, crazy sci-fi movies and everyone is being tracked by the bad AI, and on the other side you just have your standard mathematician that applies like algorithms that have been there for 50-60 years and just very like rationally deploys them just in order to serve the customer. That was the main reason for us, that we just couldn't keep up with manual review anymore. because we were forced by Google and Apple to make a decision in 40 milliseconds, and no person can ever make a decision in 40 milliseconds whether this is a fraud case, right?
Yeah, but this is a really interesting discussion, and I'm also a little sad that this only seems, at least in my perception, seems to take place in expert circles, and but this should also take place in a larger round, because it has many aspects, also even ethical aspects. For example, if you use a predictive engine to detect or prevent fraud, of course, it's an understandable aim or objective for a bank. But what do you do with those that you predict will be fraudulent in the future, and if they find out about it and they sue you, because it's just a guess from an algorithm, how do you handle that? And this is something that to me hasn't been solved yet. At least I haven't seen or heard it. So if you have any other opinion, happy to hear that. But it's something that is missing in the entire hype of AI and machine learning, that there's also something to maybe look a little deeper into to fully understand it and to know the consequences. And that's something that I'm always happy to hear and to discuss, because it's definitely needed to get some opinions and some decisions on that, also from a regulatory perspective, I would say.
Definitely, fully agree. At the same time, these problems have always been there. So nowadays it might be a machine that rejects you and hinders you from getting a loan. Before it was the teller in the bank. And my experience in many fields is that a machine is less racist, for example, than someone that sits in the bank. But you're totally right. This needs more discussion, and also I would say more rational, fact-driven research and discussion in the public domain. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah.
You mentioned, Andreas, also sort of, I found that interesting. You said then people are afraid of losing their jobs and so on. Was it a also emotional topic? How did you handle that at UBS? Like introducing this technology that a lot of people are maybe afraid of?
I think it's not this thing alone. It is many things that happen around us. We see the move to offshoring and nearshoring. I would say that was the first wave of trying to make things more efficient without new technology, rather playing the labor arbitrage, which I guess you know this, in all the banks plays and still plays a huge role, so that you try to work out of competence centers. Then I would say Europe, we speak out of the region Europe here, post-financial crisis was not the fastest to recover when you compare to Asia and the US. I would say we are a very special region. We are very established, very solid, very high standard of living and quality, very high level of education, everything. So really the place to be on the one hand side, but on the other hand, we are not showing these aggressive recovery and growth rates that you see in other regions. That drives again cost pressure, and therefore people are sometimes surprised that we want to reduce rather increase the workforce. So many things happen in parallel, and then obviously artificial intelligence and cloud and other things come in. So it is in that context to be seen. So it's a wider story that we have to explain. I said it before, we have to make sure our people understand that at the level we work, at the level we earn in the industry, we have to provide more value, and therefore we have to use our skills and education and use technology wherever we can to drive automation and then drive innovation through intelligence and the good education people have. It's a difficult answer, I would say. So you can see actually by the way I answer that I have not found the ideal way to communicating this. And I think everybody listening in here from Europe knows what I'm talking about. I mean, our jobs are by everything else but not secured. But on the other hand, we have to face the challenge, and we have to face the regional situation. We are competing against Asia and the US, no question.
Yeah, I think it's also a chance if you use, maybe not artificial intelligence alone, but automation or automating processes. It's a chance to focus on more quality focused or driven jobs. We had a similar discussion when we were introducing a chatbot for our customer service, people were afraid that they would lose their job. They didn't. In the end, we hired even people because we wanted to, or we had a phone service, which is rather unusual for a digital bank, but this was seen as an added value for the customer. So we could move away from the simple tasks that had to be done manually to a more client-driven and client-focused approach. And of course, this is a few some time back, and it's different now. But the discussion was the same on our end, that people are afraid of losing their job, which is a totally natural thing. But if you give them a perspective that they might be able to get rid of the stupidity of their task and to do something more challenging or more fulfilling, more purposeful, that's on then different discussion, and it might be able to lower the pressure a little bit. Of course, there's always efficiency-driven tasks in the banking industry, especially after a financial crisis, and the next one may be coming up. We don't know. So this is also here. I'm repeating myself. Two sides for the same coin.
Yeah. Yeah, interesting. It's interesting. I mean, we now talked a lot about potential use cases and their limits, and then the culture and people aspect of it, not so much the tech aspect. And of course, we are not developers, but maybe what were some of the technical limitations or problems that the two of you came across when introducing all these cloud and AI innovations that you described? Maybe I can start with a simple example. So one of my first assumptions was that this would require super expensive and difficult engineers, difficult to hire. And of course, it's true that an engineer that's trained in cloud technologies requires a certain skill set. But what we found is that one of the main difficulties was actually data quality. So for all AI use cases, data quality is super key. And this is a problem that in the industry we've always had, even in the, I don't know, 100 years ago, that your CRM and what's in there is key in order to forecast customer behavior. And that, I don't know, if you cannot read the handwriting of the applicant in the application process, then you cannot prevent fraud, stuff like that. I found that interesting, and then discovered that there's really a lot of innovation happening in that field, for example, with things like data cleansing and preparing and ETL processes.
What comes through my mind, Nicolas, is it's not exactly to your point, but you trigger that. There are for sure technical aspects you can talk about, but I think the technology is advanced, and the technology experts exist, and you can get access to it. I think that is not the limitation. The limitation is that we all understand that technology more and more moves to the center of what the future will look like, and we need to bring technology closer to the business strategies. Or maybe, I mean, in the past we always said technology enables business strategies. Maybe it's at one point the other way around, and really technology drives actually then the business strategy. But I think I see lots of limitations in the way that very often, if you're purely business minded, you think you get like a new iOS release from Apple, you click on a button, overnight everything gets installed, and then I have artificial intelligence components in the value chain somewhere. But it requires a lot of interaction between the business side, the middle offices, the back offices. To your point, the quality of data, how you get access to data, how you bring it into the workflows and so on. And I see at the moment, in our at least organization, the biggest limitation is that we need to learn and understand and embrace the fact that working together, technology and business is that's in the center. Is not nice to have, it's a must have. If you don't do that, you cannot survive in this environment anymore. And that's where I see the limitation, actually. Embracing that fact.
That is a really strong point. Yeah. How
Yeah,
did you feel about that, Fidor?
Well, Fidor is different because we only exist for 10 years, because in my opinion, the biggest limitations, and that's what I experienced in my previous jobs, is legacy architecture. And especially also in large corporations or even also large banks, if you are trying to move parts of your infrastructure or parts of your solutions to the cloud, there's always, in my opinion at least, always the connectivity or the interface issue to have, especially if it's a monolith structure or architecture that has to be connected to a hybrid or to a cloud solution, is always the data exchange and the interoperability of these systems. In my experience, a big issue that might or is always or most often underestimated. This is the technical side of it, and also there's also a psychological thing, and that's what I saw in the cloud payments software industry, the reluctancy of especially also IT guys to move towards the cloud, because we discussed that, then they might, and many of them also lost their jobs or had to do something different, because if you have your own basement, you have to take care of with your servers, and all of a sudden you go towards the cloud. This is a limitation from the workforce, and there also you have to have a clear communication and a transparent way of making it clear how this is fitting the business strategy, your vision, how to handle the consequences. And if you don't do that, in my opinion, it's a big limitation, because in the end, if you don't have the backing from the workforce, from the staff, it's going to be much more difficult.
Yeah, that makes sense. And it's interesting, Martin, because in the end, we always get back to the point that it's about people behind the technology and how to convince them, how to lead them and excite them also for the changes, and really well speaks to the point you made, Andreas. And maybe, we are near the end. We have 10 more minutes, but the one topic we didn't really touch on yet, quite unusual for a payment panel, is the regulator, right? And in the end, the regulator is also people that we need to convince and also pull into this discussion. So maybe very quickly, did you have any experiences in that field? Anything you might want to add on that?
Well, I would say, again, not absolutely comprehensive answer, but first of all, we need a level playing field. I said it before. So where regulation kicks in the area of payments, it should kick in for banks, for big techs, and for fintechs, and everybody more or less at the same level. I think that is just required. Otherwise, you create some imbalances in the environment, which over time will become difficult to handle. And at one point, you have to regulate it holistically. So that's point one. When it comes to artificial intelligence, there was just recently, I think, a draft paper issued about a new regulation that will come into place in some years, I think. Which is, I would say, in essence, a very good approach, but will bring some complexity, because we have to identify all the artificial intelligence components that we have from A to Z and categorize them and handle them appropriately. And I mean, Martin, you mentioned this before, I think Nicolas, you as well. What is really artificial intelligence is actually quite difficult to say. So from deep learning, machine learning to real artificial intelligence, where are we using those kind of components? What is really the framework to cluster them? So it will bring additional complexity, meaning also, again, additional cost and more intervention by the regulators. I guess it's necessary, but it will. I mean, Europe is known for that. We are not short rules and framework. So that is what comes to my mind. So level playing field, and I think good regulation, especially in the area of artificial intelligence, required. But we have to be careful that we do not make it too bureaucratic and painful. On cloud, I think there is plenty of interaction at the moment with regulators. They want to understand in detail what we do, how we do things. I have the feeling it gets more and more accepted, but still lots of work ahead of us here. I stop, so I don't want to take too much of the time of my colleagues.
No, all good. But this is always a nice summary of the topic, I would say, at least to a good extent. And yeah, with regards to regulation, I think that's also here it has a good side, and also it's also sometimes blocking innovation. But overall, I must say, also from a personal view, I would rather have somebody having a look at these innovations and these new developments than just following blindly the latest technology without making yourself aware of the consequences. So I think this is also I think it was Nicolas in the beginning who mentioned the trade-off, or was it you, Andreas? I forgot. But the trade-off here is really, and this is true for cloud as for AI or machine learning, you have to make sure you know how to trade off the aspects, the benefits, and the risks. And unless you don't have a clear view on both sides, you shouldn't be deciding on going forward, because this is the risky way, especially in the financial industry, of course. And of course, the regulation also has now made this one of the priority topics, including the security aspects. We mentioned that in the beginning. So this altogether, I think it is a good good reason to have somebody maybe from a neutral position to look at the aspects and look at the under the hood, how it's working and what it does. And then, if everybody has the same, or if all parties have the same understanding, or at least the core same understanding, then it's a good basis to move on, I would say.
Yeah, that is really well put, Martin, and good closing remarks, I would say. And just to that goal of looking at both sides and valuing the trade-offs, and getting that discussion started. We would have loved to have a few questions from the audiences, but unfortunately, without our beloved moderator, that is technically not feasible. But I think I can speak for all of us. Feel free to reach out to any of us via LinkedIn, social media, email, whatever. And I think we are all always happy to get that discussion going and sharing the experience we have on this trade-off between technology and security and regulatory aspects. At this point, unfortunately, we have to close this panel discussion. And again, sorry for the inconvenience in the beginning. Christian sends his regards, said that he couldn't take part, but next one again. And we just were asked by the studio to say that the next session will be on business continuity management, gray rhinos, and black swans. It's moderated by Professor Dr. Jürgen Brott, and we recommend everyone to stay and listen to the next session starting at 3.
Great. Have a good day, everybody. I hope to meet you in person next time.
Bye-bye.
Yeah,
Thank you.
have a good day. Bye.